Hi there, Infinite Circles. This is Admin Joe, coming to you from underneath my porch behind my house in a rainstorm. The first rule of shooting a fire performance video is don't do it in the pouring rain. So I'm going to do some stuff undercover here while I wait for the rain to stop, and then we'll do some fire stuff later on. But we decided we wanted to do a series of fire safety videos because recently several high-profile performers have been injured in various fire performance accidents. We wanted to make clear to everybody out there, we know a lot of you haven't ever done anything with fire, wanted to make it clear that there's a lot of prep work that goes into it, there's a lot of knowledge that you need to have, and safety precautions that you need to be aware of before you ever start spinning fire. And today's lesson is a pretty simple one. We're going to talk about the wicks on different fire tools and how to put them out. And the way that you ideally want to do this is with a fire-resistant fabric like Duvetine, which is just a tight weave cotton fabric that has been chemically treated to be flame retardant. It's not fireproof, and that is actually evidenced by this one here. You can see there's a lot of scorch marks on it. That's because it was used to put out a prop that was still full of fuel, and the fuel seeped onto the blanket, and then eventually it became flammable. So that's not something that you want to do ideally. Also, if you leave a fabric, if you leave a Duvetine out in the rain, it will wash those chemicals away, and then it will just become a piece of cotton fabric and not actually be flame retardant anymore. So you want to avoid that as well. This one is kind of kaput, so that's why I'm out here in the rain with it, because I don't care really how wet it gets. But Duvetine fabric can be gotten from a lot of theater supply companies. You can get it in black a lot of times. They use it as a heavy fabric for the backgrounds of different stage shows. Different fire performance companies might also have them. And personally, I get most of my Duvetine from a fire performance camp called Wildfire that happens in Connecticut 3 times over the summer. And I'll flash the website for that up here somewhere when I get around to post-editing that. But that's a really great place as well. They give everyone a full training in fire safety, and then they also give everyone a Duvetine so that you can be a safety for anyone throughout the whole weekend while you're doing it. Really, really awesome. Can't recommend it enough. But right now we're going to go inside and we're going to talk about a couple different props while I wait for this rain to stop. And yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, so here we are in my kitchen. It's much less wet in here. And it's still raining outside, but we can still go over some basic concepts regarding types of wicks and ways that you might be putting them out. So for the vast majority of you, I know we're all flow arts in general in our group, but the majority of the people in our group are hula hoopers. So the one fire toy you're probably going to see most is a fire hula hoop. Generally they have some kind of wicks. If they're quick wicks, they'll be attached kind of with little squeezy things around the edge of the hoop. This one happens to have the wicks actually inserted into the hoop and secured that way. But there's a metal bit here, and then there's the Kevlar wick at the end. That's going to be dipped in fuel and will be full of fuel for the process of your burn, which will be probably about 3 or 4 minutes or so. Probably closer to 3 if you have small wicks like this. So knowing what kind of wicks your performer is using if you are doing a safety thing is very important. These are fairly small wicks. So, like I said, probably about a 3-minute burn on these. And the most important, most dangerous time on a burn is immediately after they've started, because these are full of fuel and it's more likely that it could transfer fuel to their body and whatnot, so you want to be careful of that. But something like this doesn't have a ton of fuel on it. Also, if I look at this, my performer's going to be on the inside of the hoop probably, the wicks are on the outside. Much less chance of them touching the performer. So I can be aware of that in terms of safety standpoint. I know it's not a super high risk. Obviously anything with fire you want to be careful of, but I know that a fire hoop is not a huge high risk. So if we still had single wicks on something that wasn't a hoop, like a staff, it might be slightly bigger. See, that one's a little thicker, but this is a single wick on, this is a mini staff here, a double staff. Again, that's going to be soaked with fuel. A little easier sometimes to get your Duvetine around because this is just a long stick that your performer can lay down on the Duvetine for you. We'll go over that in a second. But if I know that I have this kind of a wick on there, I know that's a little thicker than the one on the hoop, so there might be a slightly longer burn time. You want to keep track of all these things as you're safetying. Staffs also come in double wick size, and also poi and other things come in these sizes too. I happen to have them on staff, so this is what we're using. So a double wick is going to have twice as much fuel. Going to burn probably the same way, but it's going to burn brighter, it's going to burn bigger, it's going to burn hotter, and it's going to have that much more fuel when you get started, so be aware of that. The third kind of popular wick that you might see on a staff or something else is called a cathedral wick. And this one's kind of burned. I don't know if you can see that, but the Kevlar, instead of just being wrapped around like it is here, it's actually woven together. What that does is that allows it to hold a lot more fuel, and it allows it to burn out in a greater pattern, so it's a much bigger flame, much more dramatic if you like doing the flip it up in the air, spin off thing and wowing everybody. This is big on the wow factor. But from a safety standpoint, this is probably the most fuel you're going to get on a staff in a wick like this. So you want to be aware of that, talk it over with your performer before you get started, because you don't want to accidentally have something this huge and not be prepared for it. Then there are some weird wicks that you might run into. Not that they're necessarily any different, they're just different sizes. So I'll drop everything here. This is a fire fan. They come in different varieties. Sometimes they're straight, sticking out, sometimes they're curved like this. But if you can see, that's just a small wick at the end here. If I were using a duvetine, I probably wouldn't be able to cover all of them at once, so I would have to individually, or maybe two at a time, cover them and then move over here. I can do that because they're all separated. You always want to make sure that your duvetine is big enough to cover the parts of your prop that you will need to put out. So for this, I would want to make sure it was at least big enough to do half the prop. Ideally, it would be big enough to do the whole prop. The reason I mention that is because there's another kind of prop that I'm very fond of that requires a much bigger duvetine, and that is a fire sword. If you look at this, this is all wick right here. If you want to get a sense for the size of this, if any of you have taken any martial arts, there's those wooden practice swords that they call bokens, or if you've ever been like in the mall and you see they've got those samurai swords hanging up on the wall, this is that size. This is just a boken with a Kevlar sleeve put over it and attached. So if I were safetying something like this, I would want to make sure my duvetine was long enough to cover the whole thing, because if I put this part out and then I move over here to put this other part out, the flames are just going to carry right back up and catch it on fire again. This is probably the biggest flaming thing that I own. That came out really wrong, but this is probably the most fire that I can hold in my hand when I've got this thing. And I always want my safety to be aware of how much fire that is. The other most popular, probably, fire toy out there, probably even more than fire hoops, is fire poi. This is just a wick on the end of a chain, and there's different types of chains and different types of handles and different types of wicks that you can attach to the end. You can see that's kind of a cathedral wick here on this one, woven together, like I said, in that pattern that gives you a bigger, brighter flame. And so knowing that my performer is going to have this, it's going to be a big flame, would be very important. We should talk about talking, because that's something that doesn't always happen in the community or anywhere in the world, and communication is super important. Before you light up a fire toy, you want to have a conversation with your safety person. Before you agree to safety someone who's doing a fire performance, you want to have a conversation with that performer. You want to talk about what they're going to do. You want to know if they're doing any zany tricks and things, if they're going to light their thing by breathing fire at it or something. You want to know about that, because as a safety, if they screw up, you want to be prepared for that. Or if they say, oh, I'm going to do this and make it look like I'm going to screw up, but it's really part of the plan, you want to know that as well, because you don't want to tackle them and try to put them out if they're actually doing something they intend to do. So having a conversation with your safety is super important. You want to talk about communication. So I know I get a keyword with my safety. If my safety yells down at me, I know I'm supposed to drop my props because some part of me is on fire that I can't see. And they're going to come over with the duvetine and put me out. Or there's some other situation that's going on, like maybe there's a dog that ran in from, if I'm doing a house party or something and a dog ran into the area, they yell down so that I don't risk hurting the animal. So that kind of communication is super important. And as far as safetying the performer, you want to be aware of what all their props are. And if they're using a prop that you've never used before, you want to ask them about it. You want to talk to them about how does it move, how do the flames work on it, what happens here, how much fuel does it hold, what's the average burn time. You want to know all of those things so that you are prepared to put out the props when you need to. Now, I want to say maybe 90% of the time, you're not going to have to put out props. People will spin, they'll spin to the end of their time that they have fuel for, and once the fuel runs out, the flames will go out and the prop will be extinguished, and it'll be fine. And then you just help them get their stuff off of the performance area if they need it, and that's it. However, when you do have to put a prop out, sometimes, especially with a fire hoop, it'll happen where like 2 or 3 of the wicks will go out, but there's 1 or 2 left, and maybe they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to do a half performance with 2 wicks, and so they bring it over to you to put it out. Those are the times that you're probably going to need to put something out. Ideally, that's going to be towards the end of a performance, so there will be less fuel on the wicks, and that will be something that will be safer for you as a safety. Also safer for your duvetine, because it's less likely that fuel is going to get transferred onto the duvetine while you're doing it, because then if you use that same duvetine on something else, oh, suddenly it's covered in fuel, now it's on fire, and you get something burned up like that other one that we saw there. So that is what you need to be aware of when you communicate with your performer and your safety back and forth. Make sure you talk, make sure you know what's going on. We're gonna, I think it's still raining a little bit outside, so we are going to do some inside here. I'm just going to show you some basic what it looks like before any of these things are on fire, and hopefully the rain will continue to stop and we can go outside and light things soon. Alright, hi again, I'm on the ground now. This is a safety blanket laid out. This is a duvetine laid out on the ground. Ideally, this is the best place for doing an extinguishing, for putting out a prop. You want to have the blanket laid down. If your performer yells safety out, they got tired or they just need to put their props out, you want to go over to some place just off of the performance area and lay your blanket down so that they can put their prop down. Let's say they had a poi and my performer's over here, so he puts his prop down and it's still on fire. So what I want to do is I want to kill the oxygen to it. So the best way to do that is to first go over the top here. That's gonna start to kill the flames, and then I want to wrap it with both sides, and then even squeeze at it a little. Like I said, this is flame resistant, so you're not really going to burn your hands when you do that, but you want to squeeze it to make sure there's no more oxygen there. It can happen if they put it down and I just go like this and then back off, oh, it's back on fire again. So you want to be careful of that with any prop that you're putting out. If we have a fire hoop that someone is using and they lay that down, it's a little more awkward because you've got the hoop itself in the way, but again, you want to wrap over here and then to the sides and kind of squeeze it a little, make sure there's no more air in there. Take it off and then move it to the next one, do the same thing, and keep going till all of your wicks are out. For something bigger, like a fire sword, that's where we got to get really careful. So when someone is ready to put out their fire sword, they're going to call safety out, they're going to lay it down, and they're going to lay it down so that the handle is somewhere near the edge of the duvetine over here. And then as a safety, I'm probably going to be over here. Again, if I just put out this little bit here, the rest of the sword is still on fire. That's not really going to help. So what I would want to do, fold that over there, but then wrap this around the entire thing. And for something like a fire sword that has a huge flame, probably want to leave it there for a minute, give it a chance to kill all the oxygen. No need to rush everything. Then you want to start squeezing it to make sure, and then eventually take it off. As a safety, there's no rush for this. Take your time. You don't want to hurt yourself. Take your time, make sure the fire goes out. And if it doesn't, wrap it up again. Now, if it turns out that the duvetine catches on fire because some fuel got on it or something, You want to have someone else nearby with a second duvetine that they can come by and help you out, help put it out, keep everything extinguished and whatnot. Really, a lot of being a safe fire performer is planning for things that will never happen, but being prepared for them anyway. And one of those is weird things that can happen with the props. So first step is knowing how to put them out. Alright, good news. It stopped raining outside, so we can head out and light some things on fire. I'm not going to do this alone. You should never fire spin alone. Always have someone else who can be your safety. I'm going to have a good friend of mine that has gone through all of the safety proceedings and everything, trained with me, has safetied me before, who I trust, and he's going to help me out. So we're going to go outside and do that. Before we go outside, though, I wanted to mention this thing in my hand, an umbrella. Because there are some weird fire props out there that I don't own, but a lot of times people will custom make them. I've seen fire umbrellas, I've seen fire parasols, fire bicycles, fire stilts, and even a fire battle axe. If something is weird and there's big flames around it, if you've got giant meteor-like heads on something, it's okay to have more than one safety. Wildfire has a battle axe that frequently gets passed around, and whenever somebody goes out with that, there's usually 3 safeties on, because the amount of flame that comes out of it and the amount of fuel that it holds is so huge that you want to make sure everyone is safe. You want to make sure if somebody stops and just holds it in one place, the flames get so huge that it can burn the hands of the wielder and everything, so they've got to keep swinging it, and you just want to make sure multiple safety people are around. So if you're using a weird prop, like an umbrella or something else, make sure that every one of your safeties involved is aware of what's going on, and make sure everyone has a plan for how they will work together. Okay, you cover this part, you get this part, you make sure the performer's okay. Make sure you have a plan, just like any emergency preparedness plan or any other plan for things that could go wrong. So be prepared for that. Okay, so we're going to start off with a fire hoop. I've got my friend Dave here who's got a flaming hoop that hasn't been burning for too long, but it shouldn't have a lot of fuel on it right now. He's going to lay it down, and let's see how we put it out. So he's laying it down right here. I'm going to cover it like this, and like I said, if I pull it off right now, there's still fire there. So you want to cover it, and then you want to wrap it and kill all the oxygen. And then when you take it off, it's finally out. Then for a fire hoop, obviously you would keep going for all of the different wicks until all of them were extinguished. Okay, now we're going to look at a single wick staff, which I showed before. Remember, it's the smaller wick over here. So we're going to do the flaming part right down here in the middle. We're going to go over the top. We're going to wrap it. See that little flame that shot out at the end there? And then squeeze it until the flame is gone. And now it's out. Now we're going to deal with a double wick staff that I showed you earlier. Remember, that's twice as much wick as we had on the other one. And let's bring the flaming part down to the middle like we did before. I'm going to wrap it like this. There's extra flame there, so I'm going to leave it for an extra second or two. Hold it down, make sure that it's out. And we're all set. Alright, now we're going to look at the cathedral wick staff. As I showed you before, it's a much bigger wick that's woven differently, so there's more fuel, more fire, and let's see what that more fire looks like. Holy cow. Alright, I'm going to lay that down. I'm going to go over the top here. Again, if I pull it off, holy cow, lots of fire. So I'm going to go over the top, wrap it. See, there's still even some fire over here. Give it time, kill all the oxygen, squeeze it, and now we're okay. Okay, now we're going to look at some fire fans. Remember I showed you earlier, you've got 4 separate things. There's a little bit of wind, so that might blow some of the fire onto a part of it that I've already extinguished, so I'm just going to try to extinguish all 4 at once. I'm using a duvetine towel that is big enough for the entire fan, and I'm going to ask Dave to lay that down now. And as he does, I'm going to cover the whole thing and wrap it and squeeze where I know each wick is, to make sure that each one is put out, that there's no oxygen getting to it, and then as I pull it away, it's fully extinguished. Okay, now I'm using a longer duvetine because Dave has a fire sword. He's going to lay down right now. It's been spinning it for a while, so there's not a lot of flame on it, but I still want to respect it. I want to cover it here, I'm going to cover it here, over the top. Hold the whole thing, make sure all the flame is out everywhere on it. You can see it's even smoking a little. It'll do that, that's okay. Like I said before, it's okay to wait a couple of seconds with this because there's a lot of fire on here. You want to make sure it's out. You're in no rush. And then when all is said and done, a little bit of smoke, but no fire. Okay, so now we're going to see how to put a performer out with the Duvetine. I've got a fully fueled poi here that is soaked with fuel. It's Cathedral Wicks, should be a lot of fire. I'm going to hit myself with it, and then Dave is going to demonstrate how to put me out. He's going to yell the body part that's on fire, like left leg. I'm going to know about it. I'm going to put my prop down, and he's going to come over and put me out. So let's light me up and watch that happen. All right. So I'm spinning around. Oh my God, this is awesome. Oh my God, I'm on fire.
Left leg, left leg.
And he puts me out. And then ideally, I would then come over so that he could, I'm gonna bring that down here, so that he could put this out, wrap over, and then side to side, and squeeze it. Remember I said that you don't want to necessarily be doing this a fully fueled prop? I can even see there's a little bit of fuel that got on my Duvetine, so I would want to make sure that's fully dried out before I use it again. All the fuel has evaporated because you don't want to be trying to put out fire with something that is flammable. That's just bad news in general. Okay, so that was our fire training video. The rain has thankfully stopped, and you saw me catch on fire, so for some of you that don't like me, that was probably a dream for you. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank my friend and fire performer, Dave Murphy. Want to come on? Like I said, it's good to have conversations with your performers beforehand. We know each other, so we've had this conversation many times about what to do. Always make sure you become friends with whoever you're safetying and whoever your safety is, even if you don't know them, because we're a community and it's good to be friends with people. So we're going to keep doing videos like this once a month on the second Sunday of every month. We hope you'll stay with us and watch some more of these. You can also, we'll probably have this posted on our website, which is infinitecircles.org. And once again, that fire training camp I was telling you about, Wildfire, is wildfireretreat.org, I believe. Might be .com, but I think it's .org. I'll get it up on in front of me when it's all edited. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Okay, so now we're going to see how to put a performer out. I've got a freshly fueled poi here that has been spun off very lightly, so it's still full of fuel. And during a perform... Okay.